Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to the 29th episode of A Couple Takes on MS. Hi, this is Dan Digman.
And hi, this is me, Jennifer Digman.
And welcome to this show. And what we're talking about today is Progressive MS Day. That's coming up on Wednesday, March 28th, and that's going to be the first ever Progressive MS Day.
Finally.
How do you feel? How do you feel about this, Jennifer? You, as one of the people who is living with progressive multiple sclerosis, what's this like for you?
For me, the only word I can use is finally. What took you so long? I guess I could ask that question as well. I mean, progressive MS, there are people who are living with relapsing remitting MS, but there also is a population of those of us with multiple sclerosis that are dealing with a progressive form of the disease, which until 2017, we had no medication to treat the disease. And so now that there is medication available to treat progressive MS and more awareness and attention given to that disease, I say, yay, finally.
And I think this is what's special about this. Okay, if you recall from our show that aired on the week of March 3rd, it was talking about March being it's always Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Month, and so that's get your orange out, talk about it, increase awareness about this chronic disease of the central nervous system,
of which we both have, and that's why our show is A Couple Takes on MS. I'm living with secondary progressive MS, and Dan, you're living with?
I'm living with the relapsing remitting, and I think that's where when we were first diagnosed and everything, and a lot of the medication is geared or has been geared towards slowing the progression and the frequency of attacks for people living with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis.
And that can be somewhat frustrating. I mean, certainly, just to share a little about my story, when I was diagnosed, I was classified, if you want to use that clinical term, I was classified as having relapsing remitting MS. And I took my fair share of daily injectable medication. But then, 5 years after my diagnosis, my course worsened. And there really wasn't any treatment options out there for my more aggressive, progressive form of the disease. So I think, not everyone treats their MS, and this is a debate that has been going on throughout the entire time Dan and I have had MS. Not everyone treats their MS with a disease-modifying therapy, but it's pretty remarkable that it took this long for a drug to be available, or for a disease-modifying treatment to be available for the more progressive MS.
And I think that's why it's because obviously all forms of multiple sclerosis, everybody's case is different. I mean, obviously, how can you and I both have the same disease, yet you haven't walked for like 15 years
Right.
almost, and I'm still able to walk and everything like that. So why is that? Why is there historically saying, or the numbers showing that 2/3 of people with multiple sclerosis are women? So thereby then, why am I the chosen 1/3 of men who get
It's a
this.
frustrating little disease, isn't it? Mysterious and frustrating.
And I think that's where, with it, because it's so complicated and complex to figure this out and researching, to understand why your disease, why your form progresses so much more rapidly. And I think just to where there's this notion, this honest pause to take a day within the month of MS awareness, but to take that day and designate it specifically to look at and observe and celebrate as far as you can celebrate. But I mean, seriously, celebrate the people who are living and thriving and making it through every day with progressive MS.
Absolutely. And I often say that MS is like a snowflake. No two snowflakes are the same. No two cases of MS are the same. And so when Dan and I have vastly different symptoms of the same disease, it's nice to know now that there will be a day, March 28th, in case you missed it, recognizing progressive MS. And I think that's really empowering and important because it gives us a chance, those of us living with progressive MS, or their spouses or caregivers or children, gives us an opportunity to, highlight the resources and the programs and the services available for people living with progressive MS, because that is not a death sentence by any means. And I think that's why you and I, we try and stay involved in the community and try to reach out to as many people in the MS community as possible, because there is a lot of new things just in the 20 years I've been diagnosed, and you 18 years. There's a lot of new information, treatment, what's the word I'm trying to say?
Are you looking for options?
Yes, options. I was like, observations? That's not right. But there are a lot of treatment options available. And I think that's really important because, as Dan and I have talked about so many times, living with multiple sclerosis can be frustrating and scary and isolating. And this Progressive MS Day, this whole MS Awareness Month, that gives us so many opportunities to reach out, to speak with, or to email, or to Facebook, or to phone call, just to reach out to others in our community living with some form of this disease.
And I think that's what you were talking about earlier, like when I used to go out and run, you always you never tell a runner, you're almost there, because that's the last thing as a runner you want to hear, because you start to shut down, and it's so relative in saying you're almost there. The better word to say is, finish strong.
Finish strong. And to finish strong, I guess I think of finish strong as this month of MS awareness. What a great way to end the month. Finish strong. Focus on those of us living with progressive form of multiple sclerosis, and just further confirmation that we're not alone,
and I
that
think
we're not forgotten.
And that's the big thing, is not forgotten. Because think of this, as we've lived with MS for 20 years, give or
Plus
take,
or minus, yeah.
But when we were first diagnosed, there were 3 disease-modifying drugs, and then as things have gone on, every new medication has been to treat relapsing remitting. And the further and longer you live with this disease, it's at that point is when, and they don't even know at what point you are designated as, from relapsing remitting to
there's no
secondary
certain
progressive,
time.
primary progressive. It's kind of like it just happens. You just ease into it. What happened then, Jennifer,
Yes, Dan.
What I mean, at what point were you deemed here, you once relapsing remitting person with multiple sclerosis, you are now progressive?
I believe it was just when it became pretty clear that I was losing my ability to walk, and the medication, the disease modifying therapy I was taking was just not having an effect on me, that my my disease was steadily worsening. Not steadily worsening in a horrendous way, but it was moving at a pretty healthy clip, and I needed to do something to slow it down, and that I needed to change therapies. And so I think that was it. But like I was saying, I don't know if you heard me mutter it kind of earlier. There's no certain time, like, 4 years after you're diagnosed or 7 years after you're diagnosed, you're going to worsen, because you may not. And is that not the efficacy of the available medications on the market, that people aren't progressing as quickly? And then amazingly, since now if you are worsening, there is a medication available for you.
And I think when I was first diagnosed 18 years ago, that was kind of the way things were broken down with the information, the research data that they had then, was that people initially are diagnosed with relapsing remitting, and at that point in time they said, usually after 10 years people become designated as progressive. And so then when I was hitting that 10-year mark, 11-year mark, I remember hitting 12 years with the disease, and I really started feeling like I was living on borrowed time, that the shoe's going to drop here eventually because I'm past that magic 10 years. But I think that's where there's so much more information out there and things that, and maybe with more disease modifying therapies, because, when we were diagnosed, it was like those first three. I think the beta-serin was the first, and it had only been on the market for some 5.
So they didn't have really long studies to say, at 10 years, this is what you should expect, because the medication and the research wasn't there. So I feel for you, babe.
Thanks,
that
babe.
It was like you had this on your shoulder, this weight on your shoulder, constantly, like, okay, once I get to 10 years, am I going to get worse? 11 years, like you were saying, and then you didn't. But then, conversely, how did you feel like staying healthy and seeing me worsen a little and seeing drugs, medications not available for me? Was that tough for you?
That was frustrating, because I think on many levels, it's like I knew, I was on the same, I've been pretty much on the same disease modifying therapy for all 18 years. And knowing now that if for some reason I don't feel that medication is effective for me, I have choices.
Right.
I can, there are many other options in which I could take, whereas I have all these new drugs. You sit with nothing, and you're the one. And I think that's where the research and everything for treating progressive forms of the disease, I think that's where we need more research and more treatments to fix what's wrong. I mean, obviously you want to slow the progression, but how can we fix that? And that's the encouraging thing, is that there's so much research going on there, with stem cell, with
Yes,
myelin
absolutely.
regeneration, and it's so encouraging. And I think, if you're sitting there now saying, well, what do we do? I mean, how? So I was frustrated. What was that like then for you, who had the progressive MS? Did you feel forgotten?
I felt forgotten, and I'm sure those of you listening who are in the same boat I am, living with a more progressive form of the disease, you felt like when new medication after new medication was coming on the market, indicated for use with relapsing remitting, I'm like, hey, what about me? What about me? I'm still viable, and you can help me. But it's not that easy. I know that there were not doctors sitting in a laboratory saying, let's just help the relapsing remitting, not the more progressive forms of the disease. They're not worth it. It's just a harder mystery to solve. But it was frustrating, and it was a little angering, as if that's a word. I was a little.
Well, and I wonder too. It's just like because MS is such, and this I'm just hypothesizing,
Please
as
hypothesize.
it were. But was it like because MS is such a complex disease in terms of determining the cause, the symptoms, everything, was was the um, was the relapsing remitting and the disease modifying therapy for relapsing forms of this disease. And I don't want to cheapen it at all, but it's just like, was that like for researchers, was that the low hanging fruit? Where it's like,
That's a really good.
we see there's lots of fruit at the top of the tree, thereby like the progressive forms of the disease, and it's like, but we have all these down below here that we know, this works, this, because there were those three
Right.
therapies when we were diagnosed. It was like, well, you could build on it for that.
Well, let's not forget the fact how many people really want to take a shot every day or every other day. So they were looking, the low, if you want to use the expression
So
you did.
because that's
So
not
the low hanging fruit, the next layer up was, wouldn't it be awesome if we could give you an oral medication? So I felt like, relapsing remitting gets a lot of new medicines, and then relapsing remitting gets oral medication, and then so we watched that.
well, and then the relapsing remitting went from daily injections to every other day injections, weekly injections. All of a sudden, let's have an oral med that you take every day or every other day. Well, let's make it even less complicated, and let's give you an infusion every 6 months.
And that, I guess you can think of it negatively, and at times certainly I did, where you're like, why is relapsing remitting getting all the attention? But I would like to think, and I hope that you all out there think the same way, it's going to eventually snowball. They will make one subtle tweak to that medication for a relapsing remitting, and bam, they'll find something that will help those of us living with a more progressive form of the disease. And I believe that's what they've done, and that's fantastic. And I think what's good about it is, yes, you are living with relapsing MS right now, but what happens if your disease takes a little turn for the worse? Do you feel reassured to know that there's a medication out there to treat it?
And I do. I think because once you cross that threshold where boom, you have something that's able to treat, slow the progression of, a progressive form of the disease, how soon till there will be another form of another medication? I think then also because now with this first ever Progressive MS Day, which is March 28th, so mark your calendars, and on that day, celebrate the heck out of it. Go around, check out on social media, on your Facebook, your Twitter, Instagram, everywhere, and just look and post things and do hashtag Progressive MS Day, just talking about the benefits of having these medicines, the therapies, what gets you through, how do you make it through with progressive MS, and because of that, all of a sudden, people are talking about it, and it's not like a forbidden thing to discuss, because I think a lot of times when you're first diagnosed with MS or you have relapsing forms, people are afraid of becoming progressive MS. And I guess then I'll ask the question. I have my answers, but Jennifer, should people be afraid of living with progressive multiple sclerosis?
Again, I don't know how many times we've used the illustration of snow. Snowflakes, there are no two snowflakes that are the same. MS cases, there are no two diseases that are the same. Snow, again, snowballing, it's just you find something for the relapsing remitting, and then that rolls and it makes a bigger snowball. And you'll find something for progressive. I think, yes, when I was diagnosed, I was scared of being progressive or being classified that way. But now I find comfort in the fact knowing that there are treatment options available. And also there's so much more literature and so much more information about living with multiple sclerosis. Ways you can manage your disease through diet, through exercise. I remember 20 years when I was diagnosed, and and my doctor warning me to be cautious about getting too much activity. And now they tout how important activity and exercise and stretching and now with diet, those things, those changes in just 20 years, how much it's changed. So I think don't be afraid of being considered a more progressive form of multiple sclerosis. I mean, any way you slice it, the disease kind of stinks to live with. I'm sorry, and maybe that's not the most politically correct thing to say, but
I think it's as nice as you can say it.
It's a tough, frustrating disease, and as a family member who's living with someone who has MS or taking care of someone, it's a tough, frustrating disease, and a neurologist or a nurse or physical therapist dealing with patients with MS, it has to be exhausting and frustrating and hair pulling, and it's just, but in 20 years ago, it was much more mysterious than it is now. And I remember being diagnosed and one of my very dear friends, Diana, saying, now is a good time to be diagnosed with MS. And I would say now, if I met a newly diagnosed person with 20 years of experience under my belt, I would say now is a good time to be diagnosed with MS.
Absolutely, and I think that, and now, and as far as it can be, it's like now is a good time to, if you have progressive MS, it's a good time because people are paying attention to all forms of the disease, and this is where, you know, those of us, and I don't, me personally, I don't have progressive MS, but my wife has progressive MS. So speaking on your behalf and on behalf of everyone else that we know who has progressive MS, it's like getting your stories out there, getting the just ways to communicate with people to provide that encouragement, whether that's you know, through advocacy. I know that, you know, and this, because it's a first time effort, things are developing, and at this point there are at least 4 states, one of them being Michigan, that will progress will pass resolutions declaring March 28th as Progressive MS Day within those states. And I think that, you know, to pull your snowball analogy, I mean, it'll just snowball to hopefully next year there will be more. So I think when Wednesday comes, when March 28th is here, be active on your social media. Go to Facebook, go to Twitter, hashtag ProgressiveMSDay. Find the stories, share your stories, show the resources, you know, what works for you if you have.
And I think that's so important, and I feel like I'm beating a what's the word?
Dead
What's
horse.
Dead horse, beating
Or
a
beating
drum.
a horse, yeah.
Whatever, just pick whatever,
Whatever
because I'm
analogy
going
that
to
we're
say
messing.
something, yeah, whatever analogy we're messing up. You need to be involved. You need to make a connection. And that's what's so amazing about hashtag Progressive MS Day, is through many social media platforms, you can reach out and you can find someone to talk to. And I don't dare you, because I don't want to do that, but I do. I think if you're living with multiple sclerosis and you feel alone, then you're just not reaching out, because people need support, and I think we're all here for each other. And that's the lesson, whether you're living with relapsing, remitting, or progressive form of the disease, that there is strength in numbers, and our MS community is pretty darn strong. So reach out to each other and, you know, get the information, share your story, listen to other people's story. Just don't be alone with your disease.
And I think it's just when you share your story, you're helping another person, and that's giving you the help. And I think that's where we'd be remiss if we didn't say, you know, we were grateful that our story was shared through an effort through Genentech to with a couple other people, just as far as like stories of positivity in living with, and it's none of us sugarcoated, because these are harsh realities of what we're living with. But it's like, so go to our website, danandjenniferdigman.com, or look on our Twitter, it's at DanGenDig, or same at DanGenDig on Facebook, just because we'll have links there to the Genentech site and our video and the other people's videos, and just things to help you celebrate March 28th is the Progressive MS Day.
And I love you, and I don't want to like correct you,
What did I screw up?
Well, you didn't screw up, but
right.
I think on Facebook, if you look for Dan and Jennifer Digman, you can see our Facebook. I think it's that way. On Twitter, it's
right.
Dan Jen Dig.
All right.
But just reach out, because really there is strength in numbers, and it is a close community and a strong community. And the biggest point is the strength will be definitely felt on March 28th for Progressive MS Day.
So it is #ProgressiveMSDay. And if you happen to catch this program after March 28th, keep the party going. I mean, #ProgressiveMSDay, just add to the conversation, just because it truly is never over. And I think the louder we speak, the more we say, the more people will pay attention. So that's...
Yeah, so this is a finish strong march for MS awareness for Progressive MS Day, and just really fight MS every chance and opportunity you can get.
And we'll watch for this, and please reach out to us. Again, our website's danandjenniferdigman.com, and this is a couple takes on
MS. See how we lean on each other.
I do.
Sometimes I have
you.
brain farts, sometimes you have brain farts, but together we are stronger.
Exactly. But danandjenniferdigman.com. March 28th is Progressive MS Day. Reach out to us and tell us, how are you celebrating this? How are you keeping the party going? What are you doing to help with Progressive MS? Again, this is Dan and Jennifer Digman on MS&Me Radio. Thanks again for them to giving us the platform to host this show and have the conversation with you. And we also want to thank Blue Draft Kid for composing the theme music for our show. Again, till next time, this is Dan Digman.
And this is Jennifer Digman. Have a great week.